This is DontCallTechSupport, and today we are checking out the XFX RX 9060 XT 16GB dual fan model. I think it's called a Swift. This card has been in my HD PC for a few months now, and I'm fairly happy with its performance. I'll play through games like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and Alan Wake 2 on it. My TV is of course 4K, and at that resolution you'll need to enable FSR to get playable frame rates, which for me is around 60 frames per second. The card has decent build quality. I believe this is an MSRP model, and as always, these are the ones that give you the best bang for your buck. There's no point in shelling out for RGB or massive triple fan coolers. It's not going to give you that much more performance. The 9060 XT has 3 display outputs, 2 DisplayPort 2.1 ports and 1 HDMI 2.1 port. I expect that's sufficient for most people. The card size means it will fit in most cases, but it is 2.5 slot thick. So it's a fairly thick card, but it's not that long, so the length is not too bad, but it is kind of thick. So it did slide into my SG16 case, but it barely fit into the slot that you're supposed to slide in the GPU. So keep that in mind when buying this card. On the back, there's a metal backplate with a cutout for airflow, pretty standard these days. There's also a BIOS switch, though I wonder if it's just a fan speed switch, and that brings us to fan and clock speeds. On the default BIOS, clock speed hits 3007 MHz, and on the alternate BIOS, it's 3010 MHz, so pretty much identical. This was in 3D Mark Steel Nomad. In game, you'll see higher figures depending on the load. The fan speed, however, is quite different. With the default BIOS, the fans run around 1400 RPM under the Steel Nomad stress test. It's fairly quiet, but not completely silent. With the alternate BIOS, the fan speed jumps to 1700 RPM. At this speed, it's noticeable, but not annoying to me anyway. Larger models will be quieter, of course, but this one is still pretty cool and pretty quiet. Now, how about temperatures? Well, with the default BIOS, we saw an edge temp of 51 degrees Celsius, a hotspot temp of 73 degrees Celsius, and a memory temp of 80 degrees Celsius. With the alternate BIOS, we saw an edge temp of 50 degrees Celsius, a hotspot of 71 degrees, and memory temp of 78 degrees. I think XFX did a good job with the default BIOS, and I would recommend most people stick with it. So the temperatures are good, but remember they will vary with your case, airflow, and ambient temperature. So you might see different temps than what I saw here. Ideally, I'd like a smaller delta between the edge and hotspot temp, but neither temperature is high, both are perfectly safe. So it's nice to see that you don't need a massive triple fan cooler to keep the 9060 XT cool and quiet. Now let's move on to performance. I tested on Linux with cachyOS and on Windows 11. My test system is the usual stock 13600K with 32GB of memory, 6400 mega transfers, CL32 DDR5 of course. And I tested exclusively at 3440 by 1440. The competing cards, or the comparison cards, are the 2070 Super. It's an RX 6800 reference design and an RX 7800 XT ASRock Phantom Gaming model. Now let's start with Alan Wake 2 on Linux. Here the 9060 XT slots in between the 7800 XT and the 6800, but it's closer to the 6800. Turning on ray tracing drops the FPS significantly, but doesn't change the 9060 XT's position, a trend you will see going forward. Now switching over to Windows, things are mostly the same, though the 2070 Super gains a meaningful performance bump without ray tracing. With ray tracing on, performance is much more playable compared to Linux with ray tracing on, and the 9060 XT moves closer to the 7800 XT and the RX 6800. In ACC on Linux, things are playable, but the 9060 XT falls short of the RX 6800. The bottom line here, the RX 6800 is a significant 19% quicker. If we switch to Windows, the picture changes dramatically. Performance looks much more favorable, especially for the 2070 Super and 9060 XT, which now pulls ahead of the RX 6800. Moving to Baldurs Gate 3 on Linux, the 9060 XT again trails the RX 6800. The takeaway here is that the 7800 XT is a whopping 35% faster, a massive generational leap, even though it's previous gen card. Switching to Windows gives the 9060 XT a nice boost, a 9% performance increase that finally puts it on par with the RX 6800. Next up is Cyberpunk 2077. On Linux, the RX 6800 and the 9060 XT perform identically. with the 7800 XT about 30% faster. The interesting part, turning on ray tracing makes the 9060 XT perform identically to the 7800 XT. Over on Windows, the 9060 XT is faster than the 6800, and the 7800 XT's lead shrinks to 25%. And just like on Linux, turning ray tracing on makes the 7800 XT and the 9060 XT perform on par with each other. Doom Eternal is next. On Linux, the RX 6800 outperforms 9060 XT, though you'd struggle to tell the Radeon cards apart without an FPS counter. Turning on ray tracing places the 9060 XT between the 6800 and the 7800 XT. Now on the Windows, performance is up across the board. The 9060 XT now slightly outperforms the 6800, though the 7800 XT remains 20% faster. Turning on ray tracing closes the gap, putting the 7800 XT and the 9060 XT very close to each other, with the 7800 XT holding just a slight edge. Next is Oblivion Remastered. On Linux, the 9060 XT delivers just above 60 frames per second on average. The key takeaway here is that the 7800 XT only has an 11% advantage, and the 9060 XT actually managed to outperform the RX 6800. Switching to Windows raises all boats, and the 7800 XT is now 15% faster than the 9060 XT, which still maintains a strong 17% lead over the RX 6800. Farming Simulator 25 is a fascinating case. On Linux, the 9060 XT is outperformed by the RX 6800 by 18%, and the 7800 XT by a huge 40%. The story completely flips if we switch to Windows. The 9060 XT's performance rises while the other Radeon GPUs sees a drop. This makes the 9060 XT faster than the RX 6800, and the 7800 XT's lead shrinks to just 18%. For Expedition 33 on Linux, none of the GPUs hit 60 frames per second, and the 9060 XT delivers performance similar to the RX 6800. Over on Windows, performance improves for all GPUs except for the 9060 XT, which is only 1% quicker. This allows the RX 6800 to outperform it by 12%. In Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 on Linux, the RX 6800 and 9060 XT perform identically, with the 7800 XT outperforming both by 28%. The Windows results are interesting. We see identical performance from the 7800 XT and 6800 compared to Linux, while the 2070 Super and our 9060 XT gets a slight performance bump. Our final game is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. On Linux, the 9060 XT is the slowest Radeon GPU here, outclassed by the RX 6800 by 14% and the 7800 XT by 30%. Switching to Windows helps the 9060 XT gain a bit of ground, while the other GPUs deliver the same FPS as on Linux. Looking at the average performance here, taking both ray tracing and non-ray tracing into account, we average all the figures. We find that on Linux, the 9060 XT performs about the same as the RX 6800, but with the advantage of supporting FSR 4. The 7800 XT is 25% faster on average under Linux. Under Windows, the 9060 XT looks much better. It's about 20% faster than its own performance on Linux. This delta could shrink though, as these benchmarks were done shortly after the card's release, and now I'm waiting for the RTX 5070 because I got a good deal on a Black Week or Black Friday deal. So check back for that review to see if driver updates have improved performance. So for the Windows average, the 9060 XT now slots in between the 7800 XT, which is 17% faster, and the RX 6800. The final score, the 9060 XT delivers an 11% performance increase over the 6800, plus the benefit of FSR 4 support. Now for the conclusion. For under 400 USD, for now anyway, I think this is a decent card. Personally, I wish its raster performance was closer to the 7800 XT and the ray tracing performance could outperform the 7800 XT, so I'm a bit disappointed by that gap. There's quite a performance jump from the 9060 XT to the 9070. So who is this for? If you have an RX 6800, I see no reason to switch to 9060 XT. It will be a side grade with FSR 4, it's not worth it. And you can get FSR 4 working on that card, although it's a bit of a hassle. But if you're on an RX 6600, a 2070 Super, an RX 5700 XT, or like a 3060 or something similar, I think this is a worthwhile upgrade, though I would steer clear of the 8GB version. If you're looking like a sub $300 price point, you should maybe take a look at the Intel cards because they give you more VRAM. And if you're a Linux user, I would definitely prefer this over something like a 5060 or 5060 Ti, as Nvidia performance still seems to take a larger hit on Linux compared to mature Radeon cards. And that's all for now. I got to start retesting for the next review, which should be out in a couple of weeks, so hopefully I'll see you then. Goodbye.